Thank you, Bill, and thank you for a wonderful music so far and that lovely meditation.
Thank you.
As you've all been aware, this month is the month of understanding. So my talk title is The Light of Understanding. From Proverbs 4:7 in the New King James Version, we read, "Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and in all your getting, get understanding." For me, this is telling me that it is important to get wisdom, but the wisdom is not much use unless we get understanding of that wisdom. An important aspect for both our humanity and divinity is the getting of understanding. In her book, Your God-Given Potential, Winifred Wilkinson Horseman wrote, "The awakening of our own faculty of understanding starts with questioning the old ways of thinking that may have been taken for granted, wondering about the way," and she has that in inverted commas, "and the truth," also in inverted commas, desiring to know, above all else, desiring to know the spiritual truth. So let's see if we can turn on more of that light of understanding. Again, I'm going to another author. This one is Linda Martella Whitsett, and in her book, Divine Audacity, which is one of the books we're going to use in September, she wrote, "Everyone has within him the light of divine understanding. Those who do not recognize that they have this inner light are thinking intellectually instead of spiritually." Earlier this month, we celebrated NAIDOC Week, in which the focus was on honouring and understanding more about the Indigenous people of our country. So why do I mention this? Well, I know during that week of reflection, I realised that apart from a slight knowledge, a very slight knowledge of some of the Dreamtime stories, which I have used during talks over the years, I have very little knowledge or understanding of the Indigenous culture and practices. Growing up, I was aware of their existence and little was said about them except, as I remember, in negative terms. I'm gradually realising that as descendants of the new arrivals in this country, we, those of us who are Caucasian, have a lot to learn from these people. I was so thrilled to hear earlier in the month that the Indigenous people are being used and employed as forest management people in some of the forests. And because they have learned over the thousands of years that they have lived in this country, how to understand and live and learn about the ways of the forest so that we don't experience those disastrous bushfires that we have over the years. They know how to cool burn, and that is what they're doing in the forests that they are managing. And this, we are looking forward to see that no further really bad bushfires are experienced. I think that as I'm getting older, I realise that, yes, there are some in the community that are not so well behaved, but let's face it, every community has those people. But we really do need to understand so that we can live together in harmony. And I think that A week is great to recognise and understand these people, the people, Indigenous people, but I don't really think that it needs to stop there. I think we need to continue on beyond the confines of that week to really understand how we can live together in peace and harmony on this continent. So the power of understanding is one of humankind's innate abilities, along with many more. But in Unity, we do focus on the 12, as written about by Charles Fillmore. And most of you know that each of the disciples represent one of our 12 powers. Each one of the powers has several attributes, can be used in a positive or negative way. And each one of the faculties or powers is located in a particular body centre, as suggested by Charles Fillmore. Each has also been, as we've learned over the month, allocated a colour. So let's just reiterate that. Understanding is located in the front forebrain, and the colour, that is spiritual understanding, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And the colour is gold, and we've seen some beautiful slides with the gold background to remind us of that. And of course, the disciple is Thomas. Understanding is the power to comprehend and interpret knowledge and make cognitive connections. There are two types of understanding. One is intellectual and one is spiritual. In the book, Power Up Your Life, the authors Bill and Sher Holton and Paul Hasselberg wrote, intellectual understanding is mostly gained from the school of hard knocks. It is subject to temptation and sometimes used for selfish ends. By combining reasoning with an intellectual understanding, we are able to arrive at valid, practical conclusions. End of quote. When we have intellectual understanding, we have an awareness in the relative realm. This may be those times when we declare, oh, I get it. Years ago, I was working with a class of Year 3 children. I was a student myself, but I was in a demonstration school endeavouring to demonstrate my skills as a potential teacher to a well-trained teacher that was in charge of the class. I was teaching a maths class. Don't ask me what the concept was that I was teaching, because that I do not remember. What I do remember is that after speaking with all the children on the mat and sending them back to do some work, I could see one of the children struggling. It was very clear to me that he hadn't picked up what I was trying to teach. Now, a lot of the children in this class had English as their second language, and he was one of them. So I went over to him and sat. And I went through the concepts a little bit more, using slightly different language. And then again, until I saw the light of understanding shine on his face, and I knew he got it. And so this child was then able to go on and do the work that had been assigned. He comprehended the concept that had been teaching. And this is what understanding is about. He had a real desire, and I could see that from his face, to get correct answers for me. And with some help, he was able to use his power of understanding to do just that. Mathematics, as you all know, uses principles. And once we understand those principles, we can use that knowledge to solve other mathematical problems. This is intellectual understanding. We all have that ability to understand and know how to use our experience and arrive at practical conclusions. Ideally, once we know and truly understand our true nature of being fully human and fully divine humans, I'll get it right in a minute, we will endeavour to turn the light of understanding to positive use in our lives. When we have a real desire to know, we may ask questions. We may attend classes about the area of which we're seeking knowledge. We may teach ourselves from books. And today, of course, we can use video and YouTube, where we can get instruction on almost anything. I know often if I have a challenge with IT, I'll ring my son who lives in Tasmania, and he'll say, "Mum, get in touch with Mr. Google. He'll have the answer for you." But he'll walk me through the situation anyway. But he said you can find any of that knowledge and get your own understanding from Mr. Google, which is true. I have tried that a few times. But many years ago, again, it was many years ago, my father wanted to build a solar water heater. They were something new in town. And he had never done this before, obviously. So he wanted an understanding of how to make this jolly thing. He didn't have YouTube and videos or Mr. Google to go to. So he went to the library and he read until he got understanding of how to build a solar water heater. Of course, he had to comprehend what he was reading and then put it into practice. Dad used his will and wisdom as well as his love for creating. And we have no doubt learnt during the last month that we do need often a combination of powers to work. Did he make mistakes? I'm sure he made many. But his will to succeed motivated him to keep on. He had a clear understanding of what he desired to achieve, and a desire to understand is extremely important companion to turning on the light of understanding. I might say his heater was pretty successful and lasted for many, many years. In fact, it probably is still on the house that he put it on. So these are examples of the way we use our power of understanding in the relative realm. And yet the divine self was involved in both examples, I believe. Without that realization of the aspect of the self, of that self being involved. Because I didn't understand, and my father certainly didn't understand, that we're divine beings. And we have that divine ability within us all. But so how does spiritual understanding differ from intellectual? Again, in their book, Power Up Your Life, the authors wrote, spiritual understanding is gained by investing time in the silence. It results from the quickening of our spiritual nature, our divine nature. This type of knowledge sometimes includes and always transcends intellectual understanding. This knowing comes swiftly and arises outside of the reasoning process. It comes as an internal knowing, or perhaps a still small voice that may seem more like a reflection or echo of something we have heard and or forgotten. And again, when we get that understanding, we may say, "Oh, I get it." As you've learnt, Thomas is the disciple who represents understanding, but he was often referred to as Doubting Thomas. Why? Because he was forever asking questions. He demonstrated a desire to know at a deep level about that which he heard Jesus speak. But he didn't understand, but he wanted understanding. He demonstrated a desire and willingness to believe in those things, but did not always understand, and so he asked questions. By truly understanding the message, he was able to develop an understanding faith, as well as his faculty of understanding. For myself, I have found that a deep desire to know, the will to understand, to explore, question, and then use my power of wisdom and discernment to release that which does not feel right for me helps me on my spiritual journey. This has resulted in my reading many books, attending many classes, listening to many talks, watching lots of videos, and teaching. And I still don't get it always right, but that's part of the human self and the human experience. Teaching, too, has been a wonderful way for me to examine my own inner convictions, beliefs, and practices, and learn along the way. More often than not, for me, I do realise that I have gained an intellectual understanding of the spiritual teachings before I really get it and know at a deeper internal level that I know that I know. And when I heard it said that we are fully divine, fully human and fully divine, I knew that to be true. I knew at a very deep level. I have an understanding of that. Spiritual understanding comes from knowing and using spiritual laws and principles. Just as with mathematics, it's about knowing and understanding the principles or laws that stand under every aspect of life. When we turn on the light of spiritual understanding, we are in effect, turning on our own internal light of our full potential. Emily Cady wrote, "When you first consciously desire spiritual understanding, you do not attain it at once." She says later in the same paragraph, "We begin our journey," and she's used a capital J for that, "toward understanding by cutting off the branches of our selfishness. We try to love instead of to hate. Instead of avenging ourselves, we begin to forgive, even if it costs us great mental effort. We begin to deny envy, jealousy, anger, sickness, and all imperfection, and to affirm love, peace, and health." And that's from Lessons in Truth. Charles Fillmore wrote that spiritual understanding is the ability of the mind to apprehend and realize the laws or principles of thoughts and the relation of ideas one to another. Winifred Wilkinson Halsman wrote, "In awakening the understanding, it is good to remember that there is another centre which represents this attribute." Remember, I said the spiritual centre is in the front forebrain. But the other centre, she writes, that represents this power is the part of the body that stands under the whole, the feet. You may have heard that the feet are our understanding. I know I had, but didn't realise what she tells us late in the next sentence. She says we must have the spiritual understanding that lifts us above the world, but also we must develop the base that enables us to relate to our world in a spiritual way. So we need both kinds of understanding, the intellectual and the spiritual. Of course, I must mention the importance of prayer and meditation. For this shines the light of understanding within. Spending time in meditation gives us the opportunity to open our heart and mind to the still small voice of the divine within and a deeper inner knowing of truth. To close, I read again from Winifred Wilkinson Horsman. I found this a wonderful book when I was first introduced to the 12 Powers, and obviously I'm still using it. She writes, awakening the faculty of understanding in a spiritual way is an activity that will change not only your way of thinking, but also your way of life. Be prepared for this as you question, study, and even pass the level of prophecy, which he talks about earlier in the chapter, to go on to greater discoveries of truth. There is a spirit in you that has all the answers. Trust it as you proceed in an orderly, harmonious, loving way to unfold this faculty. And I do trust you have a wonderful week. And let's see us all coming out of lockdown. God bless you all.
Thank you.